Hey guys, in this video I'm going to talk about how to bulk generate personalized outreach messages using Google Sheets and Make.com. So I've had a few people mention this to me about, simple ways to bulk send a lot of messages to people. Um, Obviously it's a really important business piece because if you have a bunch of leads and you're not reaching out to them, it's kind of just money that's sitting there. And actually most businesses have a huge lead list. Like they might have hundreds or thousands of clients that they've worked with in the past, or dead leads that they've just never reached out to again. And for most of them, the reason why they're not reaching out is just that it's a lot of work. So that's why automation and AI is perfect for this kind of thing, because it's bulk work and there's a lot of research involved. But if you set up a tool properly, it's way easier. So I'm going to do a full rundown of how that works. So to begin with, let's say I have a lead list in Google Sheets, right? Or maybe it's just a CSV, it can be in Excel, but it looks something like this. I have a bunch of leads, I know their names, and I know their email addresses. What I want to do for each one is figure out how to send personalized messages to each. And I actually used to do this quite a bit when I worked as an engineering consultant. We spend a lot of time researching potential customers. We look for stakeholders, do a lot of research about them, and then draft like one by one these personalized outreach emails. So, for example, I'd look up Tim Cook. I'd find a bunch of information about him. I'd look at recent news, and then I'd actually go right into a Google Doc and say, you know, here's information about Tim Cook, and then I'd draft something that says, like, hey Tim, congrats on the recent positive news. And I'd say you're probably wondering about this project in somewhere about phones. Um, and we'd have a sequence of these emails that would basically send one at a time. And that would just kick off conversations and turn them basically from a lead into someone that would be willing to have a conversation, like a call with us. And that's pretty much how we generated all the new business. And it worked, honestly, really well. Like if you can send out good personal emails, it's incredibly valuable. So here's how to do that if you don't have a team of interns working for you. We're going to use a tool called Make.com. I've talked about it before, but it's basically a free AI automation software. It's super easy to use, and I'm going to walk exactly through how I've set this up before and how a lot of people actually want this to work. So for starters, I have my lead list over here. I'm going to go into Make and create a new first module for Google Sheets. And then what I want to do is search rows. So for the connection, I've talked about this before, but if you don't already have this set up, you can just add a connection. You basically log in with Google and then give it permission so that it can look at your Google Sheets. And then I'm actually just going to select it from here. So lead list, and I only have one sheet name. So if I have a bunch, I can select it, but in this case, it's fine. Table contains headers. Yes. And I actually want to fetch everything, so I'm just going to leave this alone for now. Ordering doesn't really matter. For the limit, I'm just going to set it to 2 for now because I don't want to have too many all at once. I basically want to test to make sure that I can get it working before I build the rest of it out. So let's try running this and see what happens. Okay, cool. So I'm getting an output that is basically the first 2 rows of my table here, which is perfect. There's also this piece over here, context. Don't worry about that right now. I'll get to it in a bit. So the next step is I need a way to basically iterate through multiple rows and make it so that I can do a bunch of things in bulk. And here's the easiest way to do that. It looks a little complicated, but basically I have a specific tool that will like look at all the rows at once and then aggregate that into one object that I can work with throughout the rest of the code or the rest of the scenario. So what do I need here? I'm going to do first name, last name, company, email, and I'm also going to do the row number. And the rest of the information here, I don't really need, but I'm going to select all this as well. Okay. Now, I'm fetching all the information, I'm aggregating it into a single array, and then I'm going to do one more thing here. And again, this looks more complicated than it is. All I'm doing is manipulating the data so that it's easier to work with in this scenario. So I aggregate it, and then this iterator just means that for each item, I can go through it. Now the next step, once I get my data and I'm setting it up properly, I want to be able to do research on it. So I'm going to use something called Perplexity. And there's a lot of things you can do with this tool. It's honestly really cool. It's basically like ChatGPT, but it's a lot better doing research and finding things on the internet. Again, similar to Google, you can have like a Perplexity connection. In this case, you actually need an API key for, but it gives you pretty specific, information on how to set this up. For model, Sonar is fine. It's also the cheaper version, so we can stick that for now. And then for messages, this is where things get kind of interesting. And actually, one thing that I'm going to do is... Actually, yeah, this is fine. Okay, so what I'm going to say is this. For my message, I basically want it to research specific information that would be useful for me to send an outreach message to that lead. So in this case, I need information about, let's say, the first name, last name, company, and the email. Now, basically what I'm going to do is send a specific set of instructions to this AI to tell it what I'm looking for. So in this case, I'm going to say, I am Josh. What am I doing? Yeah, so for context, let's say, this is the business that I run right now. I'm running Wade Accounting, and we do bespoke accounting services for software companies. So I'm going to say, I'm Josh at, Wade Accounting. Actually, I'll just copy this. It's fine. Okay. I am Josh Wade, and I do accounting services. Wade Accounting provides bespoke software companies. Okay, great. I want to understand this person. And actually, I'll just maybe fit this in. So first name, last name. And I'm going to say at company. I want to understand this person and, learn how I could potentially help them with my services. So basically, what I'm telling the AI is, hey, here's who I am. Here's the company that I run. I do this specific kind of service, and I'm trying to understand this particular person and, at this particular company. So this is a really simple prompt. There's a lot of things you can do to improve it, but for now, this is honestly really good just as a way to get research. And all that really matters here is that I'm properly putting in these placeholders. So first name and last name, that's coming out of the iterator. And then for the role, I'm just going to set this as user. For max tokens and temperature, we don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to save there. Okay, now let's actually just run that and see what happens. So I'm going to click save and run once. Okay, so you'll notice while it's running, it's fetched my first sheet over here. I see like the little 1. Everything's been iterated, or it's been aggregated and then iterated. And now you'll actually see a 2 over here. This is neat because it meant that it did something twice, which is actually perfect. So if I look back, I can kind of poke through to see what the whole scenario did when I ran it. In this case, I fetched the first 2 rows. So Tim Cook and Elon Musk. And what should have happened is it went through the rows, and then for each one, it did research. So this is the output of Perplexity, which is like our web AI. And I can look at all the way in here, choices, the first one, message, and then content. Okay, cool. So it did a bunch of research, which is handy, and it should have done it twice. So let's see. Yeah, Operation 1, that was for Tim Cook. And then Operation 2 is for Elon Musk. Cool. Okay. So that's awesome. My research is all set up. Now the final thing that I want to do is I'm going to update the row that I have with that new information. So I'm creating another piece over here, Google Sheets again, but in this case, the module is actually update a row. And then I'm going to find the same sheet I'm using. leads list. There we go. And then we're using the same sheet. For the row number, I can actually use, great, just this over here. Okay, nice. So what this is going to do is just like look at whatever row I'm currently viewing and then allow me to update anything I need. And in this case, I'm going to leave everything alone except for research. I'm going to go in over here and I'm going to find that same message. Cool. So actually, if I run this again after I save it, what it should do is update these two cells over here. Nice. Okay, so that was the first one. Tim Cook is the CEO of Apple. Great. And it's even got some information, Apple's financial reporting. And there we go. Here's the second one. So I've got my research set up. And in this case, what I've actually done is I'm limiting this to the first two. So I'm only doing like 1 and 2, but if I wanted to remove this limit, I could do them all at once. So that's actually pretty useful on its own, right? Like a few years ago, it would take me probably like 2 or 3 hours to get something as good as this. I would spend all this time looking on Wikipedia and looking at the news and figuring out other details about whatever's going on here. But we just did that automatically, and we can do it at scale for as many leads as we need. There's a small cost associated to it. Like each time we use Perplexity, it'll cost something like half a penny to get this much information, but it's basically free. It's so cheap, and it's worth it to do this to improve the odds of you converting a lead. I'm going to make one adjustment because I forgot to include it here. Sometimes it's useful to include like recent news, so I'm also just going to add that in. Maybe about recent news and ongoing or upcoming projects that might be relevant. So in this case, for my accounting services, right? Maybe I just want to understand what's going on at the company, what's in the news, what's things that might be helpful if I'm going to contact them. Okay, cool. So I have a system that will do research on each lead, and then it'll update my Google Sheet. That's great. But that's not actually enough, right? I would be able to send emails to each person. So let's add another step. Now, what I've seen a lot of people do is they'll use OpenAI to basically write an email for them based on the research that they get. This is fine. OpenAI is okay. I'm a bit strange because I actually prefer to use Claude, which is very similar, right? It's also a language model that can write stuff for you. I just like it more. I think it's better at, writing text, so I'm going to use this instead. But for all intents and purposes, it's basically exactly the same as OpenAI. It just has a slightly different style. And then for models here, probably we can use one of the cheaper ones. In this case, Haiku is fine. Claude is a little bit more expensive, especially if you use like the really good models like Opus 4.5. It's very expensive. Haiku is super cheap, so that's fine. And this is kind of where things get interesting. I basically want to train it to write a really good email message. And when it comes to this kind of thing, it depends a lot on whatever the company is. Like you kind of want to write in the style of the individual who's sending it. So, if I have a particular style of writing or speaking, I'd like to match that as closely as possible for my emails. So it's not like weird corporate jargon that doesn't match how I speak. It helps a lot if you have like copywriting skills and if you know the best way to communicate with your customers, because some people, they even just want to be communicated with in a certain way. I'll leave that to you, and in this case, I'm just going to keep it simple and focus on the technical side. So I'm basically just going to give it one message for now, and then this will contain all the instructions it needs on how to write the first email. So here's what we have. I'm going to say, you are, Josh Wade at Wade Accounting. Actually, I'm going to copy the same context that I have here. Wade Accounting Services. So Wade Accounting provides bespoke accounting services for software companies and specializes in audit. Write an initial outreach email to, and then I'm going to include these names here at company Great. So I'm saying, in this case, like write initial outreach email to Elon Musk at X. Here's relevant notes on this lead. And then we can actually use the same research that we got from this step. Okay, now, the result of this is not going to be amazing. Like if I just run this on its own, probably, oh, okay, I guess I do need a max tokens. Let's make this like, actually let's make this 400. I don't need much more than that. Now, if I run this, I'm actually going to make this 1 because I only want this to run for the first row. I'm going to run this whole thing again, and we're going to see how Anthropic basically creates a new email. Okay, so I did my research again, should have updated here, and then let's see what the output looks like. Okay, so a couple things. It includes the subject in its output, so maybe we want that, maybe we don't. Then, hi Tim, I hope this email finds you well. I'm Josh Wade, founder of Wade Accounting. I'm reaching out because I'm following Apple's exceptional financial blah, blah. Okay, so this is okay. It's basically like a pretty kind of standard email. It really depends, right? The style of the lead that you're reaching out to. So maybe for Tim Cook, he likes these kinds of emails. If I'm running like maybe not accounting services, but like solar roofing to, homeowners, they probably want something that's more casual, right? This sounds a little bit corporate. I could probably write a better email. So one thing to do, like let's say I really want to write in a very candid style of voice. So I'm just going to give that instructions to Claude. Right, in maybe like a Spartan candid style of voice, and use, I over we. So I'm going to say, instead of candid, I'm going to say casual. And then something like use I over we. That's just like usually a good way to get people's attention. A lot of honestly AI sounding text basically says, we provide services like this, and it's generally better to make it sound like it's more personal, right? And try to make it right as if you actually like how you sound when you're speaking to a friend. So I could even mention that in this too. Speaking to a friend. Okay. And there's a lot of other pieces we can add here too, right? I could even say like follow this example. Yeah, and if I have winning copy that I know works well for emails, you can write this out. It again really just depends on the business, and it depends on the leads that you want. And you could even have like, if I know that some leads want to be spoken to in a certain kind of way, I can actually include that in here as well. But for now, I think this is good enough. One more thing I'm going to add is like open with a positive statement about recent news, or a congrats of some kind. Okay, so that's fine. Now, this is going to generate my first email. And what I'm going to do once I have that is, again, update that same row. So I'm going to add another Google Sheets update row here, and then find the same row I was looking at before. Here we go. And in this case, I'm going to look at email number 1, and I'm going to give it this text response. So now if I run this whole thing again, what it should do is create my research, and then it should, once it's done, fill in this email section here. Let's see. It's loading. Okay, there we go. So, hi Tim, congrats on the strong quarter. $100 billion in Q4. That's great. That's kind of growth and trajectory. Awesome. There's a few other things that I could do to probably improve this, like M dashes is a big thing that AI tends to generate all the time. A lot of people that work with this, like language models a lot, this is a pretty common tell. Like if you see an M dash, probably a human didn't write it. So I'm actually just going to update the instructions to include that as well. What did this not save properly? Maybe not. So you don't use M dashes. There's some other like common tells as well where AI, when it's writing, there's just certain expressions that are quite common. I'll leave those for another video, and in this case, just know that there are some tells. This is the biggest one. Okay, cool. So I now have a system that will do research, and then it will create a first email. That's great. But it's very common again. If I have a bunch of leads, I might send a first email, and then if I don't get a reply, I'll send a second email, and then if I don't get a reply to that one, I'll send a third email. Right, and the same thing on LinkedIn. Like I'll send a message, and then maybe I might send another message. So it's nice to have this all just kind of queued up. And what's great about this, let's go back, is that we can really easily do the same thing, right? So what I'm going to do is actually create two more Anthropic. Actually, I'm just going to clone this two more times. So the first one creates our first email. This one's going to create our second email. So I'm going to say, you're Josh Wade at Wade Accounting. I'm going to say, write a follow-up email to this person at company. Here's relevant notes. I could probably improve this prompt more. Like, sometimes you want to reply in a slightly more casual style in the second follow-up email. And you can even mention specifically like, hey, I missed you on your last email, but I really think that this is a cool idea. In this case, I'm going to keep it really simple. Again, it just depends on the way that you want to communicate with your leads. And I'm also going to say, here's the first email that was sent. They have not yet responded. Our follow-up should be slightly shorter and still candid. Cool. Okay. And then for our last email, actually, I want to make sure that this is actually really short. This is kind of like the final piece where you basically say, hey, maybe I missed you. Sorry about that. And then you'd be surprised, actually. A lot of people will basically read the last email and be like, oh, shoot, I forgot to reply to the first two, and they'll basically catch up and follow with you. So again, same prompt. You're Josh Wade at Wade Accounting. Write a final follow-up outreach email to this person at company. Here's your relevant notes. Here's the first email that was sent, and the second email that we followed up with. Let's see, Anthropic, create prompt. So I think we actually want this one. And you'll notice actually, now that we're using multiple Anthropic pieces, there's like multiple things that kind of look the same. In this case, an easy way to remember this is that in make, you'll see kind of a number right here tied to the node. And I can actually zoom in here and see like this Anthropic prompt is 6, this next one is 8, and this one is 10. So that's handy to know. So I have number 2 and then number 3. I'm going to update this further. They've not responded to either email. We'll say this is our final follow-up. It should be polite and say that sounds like, maybe they're not interested at the moment, but asking them to reach out anytime if they're curious to learn more. So there's a lot of things you can do here, right? Like usually the way that we would respond was if they didn't reply to the second email, we'd send something like, hey, it sounds like you're really busy. No worries at all. Just want to let you know we're still open to this. We do this kind of work all the time. And if this ever comes up, feel free to shoot me a message. Yeah, so that's fine. So I now have email 1 being generated here, email 2 being generated here, and then email 3 over here. Now let's actually do one final thing, which is going to be basically a LinkedIn post. So again, I'm going to use Claude again. I'm actually going to keep the tokens quite low here. And this is nice. Like when you clone things, I can keep all the same information. So I'm Josh Wade at Wade Accounting, blah, blah, blah. So write a, say, LinkedIn outreach message to see this person at company. Here's relevant notes. And I'm going to say keep it very candid. So I feel like a LinkedIn DM is usually less, it's more candid than an email. Keep it very candid and imply that, I've done this, shall I say, imply that you've done this kind of work on similar projects. So actually, in this case, ideally, if you actually do have an accounting business or something like this, you can include other information about, here's a case study and include that in whatever you're creating. Okay, so what all these should do is generate the first email, or should research, and then generate the first email, and then the second email, and then a LinkedIn message. And then what I want to do, once I have all that, is update the whole row. So let's see. Email 1 is text response number 1. Then email 2 should be this one. So text response number 2. Email 3 is this one. And then the LinkedIn message should be the last Anthropic message that I send. Okay, so I'm going to save that, auto align. Now I've got this whole sequence here. I'm going to run it once, and this should just run for the first row. I usually recommend having this limit here, just because if you do make a mistake and you run through the whole thing, you'll just end up with a lot of jargon that you don't really need. And especially if there's something important, or if you're using a more expensive model even, it can get kind of expensive. Okay, so this is great. Amazing. Okay, cool. So let's take a quick look at what it did. It got a bunch of research on Tim Cook and, recent Apple news. This is quite interesting, right? And this research phase is really one of the most important pieces here. I could just, skip out this whole Perplexity bit and then just go straight to Anthropic or GPT to say, hey, read an email. The number one thing about AI language models is that they're very smart and they'll do exactly what you tell them to with the information that they have. So the special sauce is just how do I get cool information in here? And in this example, Perplexity is really good for that. If you want to get more niche, kind of curated business info, you can use other tools too, like Clay or Apollo, to fetch actual exact information about those businesses. But in this case, these are all pretty big companies, and most of what they do is public, so Perplexity is fine. Anyway, so I did a bunch of research, and then I have my first email. Hi, Tim. Saw that Apple's an all-time high. I run Wade Accounting, worked with tech companies. Great. Okay, and then second email, follow up, no pressure. This should be the final email. Let's see how this looks. Keep it short. These are actually surprisingly good, to be honest. And this is why I love Claude, right? GPT is not as good at writing, and even this could be a lot better. There's probably additional style and information I could include here, but as far as just a simple email goes, this is way better than most AI generated emails, and it's better than what most people do, which is nothing. Most people just don't send any outreach at all. And then finally, I have this LinkedIn message. This is a little bit long, but yeah, this is pretty long, but that's okay. So maybe the last thing I'm going to do is go into my LinkedIn piece. I'm actually going to make this max 100 tokens. And I'm going to specifically say, write a very short LinkedIn outreach message to. And actually, sometimes what we would do here is we'd send the first email, and then if they didn't reply, we'd send a message on LinkedIn, and then we'd continue with the email sequence. So I can actually mention that here. I could say, mention that we sent them an email, right? Because sometimes people, they're not looking at their emails, but they will just casually pop into LinkedIn. And if I see someone that says, hey, I just sent you an email, it's nice to meet you, I'll actually go back and look at that. And just so that I can include this for the AI, here's the email we sent for context. Yeah, so I'm basically just telling Claude right now, context about the company, what we're doing, we're sending an email to a person, here's the relevant notes about them. We already sent them an email, here's what we sent for context. I'm going to say try not to repeat too much of the same info, just reference it. Okay, cool. So now that that's done, I'm actually going to show you one final thing before I run it for everybody. So maybe I'm totally cool with this first row of emails and research. I actually don't want to change any of this. What I can do is set up a very simple filter. So you'll notice in the first node I have here, all I'm doing is I'm fetching every single row, and then for each one, I'm running all these AI bits to like do research and figure things out. What I'm going to do over here is actually set it so that if we already have research, right? So this exists. Actually, I'm going to say this exists, then I basically don't want to do it. So I'm only going to find columns where the research doesn't already exist, and then everything else I'm going to skip. So that way I should leave this column alone, and I'll do the rest kind of one big go. Cool. So fingers crossed. Oh, I'm also going to remove this limit, or maybe I'll set it to 20. Okay, let's run this whole thing and see what happens. So the first row is running. Let's see what happened here. Okay, great. So that's actually perfect. It didn't change my whole row on Tim Cook, which is nice. What it did do is do some new research on Elon, and it created a bunch of emails for him. And actually, this is perfect. So I have a much shorter like LinkedIn outreach message. If I was sending this, I'd actually keep it even shorter, but for this demo, it's okay. And there we go. Like it's just kind of running. You can go get a coffee, come back in 5 minutes, and this whole thing will basically be done. And honestly, these are surprisingly good. Again, like when I was doing a bunch of engineering consulting work, we'd spend a ton of time researching companies. We'd dig into their financials and learn about what projects were coming up and who was like the main stakeholder that we had to worry about. And I'd like read LinkedIn, find specific research about that person and what they'd worked on in the past and where they went to school. And we put that all together to write a really good email. But to be honest, these emails are pretty good, and it's a lot cheaper to do it this way, and it's a lot faster too. Okay, so this is going to keep running. I'm going to catch in when it's done. Okay, and we're all done. So for I think 19 rows, we did research, and then we generated a first email, a follow-up, another follow-up, and a LinkedIn message, all personalized entirely to the individual. And it took probably about 5 minutes. The whole setup time, probably like 10 minutes. Honestly, it could have been even faster if I wasn't talking so much. And for context, the total cost of doing this, right, to create this entire like filled lead list with communication, like multiple levels of communication and deep research, was about 37 US. So pretty cost effective. Yeah, that's the core of it. Like that's really, it's that easy. You get a bunch of leads, and then you add information, you write content. And for context, like this is basically what HubSpot is, right? Tons of these CRM platforms, it's a big spreadsheet with contact info, and then you add on more details over time. And the reason why it's always set up this way is that it works. Like this is actually a really effective way to handle leads, to nurture them, and to eventually get them to work with you. There's even another step that maybe I'll talk about in the future, which is, we've got all these emails. Maybe we actually want to automate sending an email, right? So we can actually go right ahead and do that as well. Like maybe for each person, as soon as I write these, I want to immediately send them. Maybe what I really want to do is create a draft for that person. And you can set this up as a step, right? Exactly what I created here. And then you can even have like another system after that where if they reply, you can put them into your CRM and do all sorts of other things. So that's the full video. I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if you're interested in other tutorials. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.